My name's Matt Reed. I lead the risk management business with ITS. Each era, in my opinion, has compounded the problem that we see today and why all of this security stuff is so important. When I got into this business and my career started in the in the late 90s, everyone got a first hit of the computer drug in the PC era. And we connected all of it through the internet era. And we're consuming it all at crazy levels now between personal and professional confluence, mobility, explosion of devices. Now we're living in this world of smart homes and Internet of Things. But the other thing that happened in this transition is we went from IT, being the deciders and being the rulers, to the users, kind of taking a significant amount of power. And I think this notion of the era of experience has kind of put us in this predicament that we're in. So will things shift back the other way? Probably. There could be another uprising of the user community. But if we look across people, the data or the information and where it lived and what we were doing to focus on it, the evolution of the threats, a lot has happened in this time, right? So when we look at the news, it's telling us every week that organizations are scrambling to solve, many problems of the previous era. Solving vulnerabilities, I would consider to be, a PC era problem as far as endpoints go. But there's a lot of different influences that go into this, and a huge one is that this workload has been cumulative for IT as well. So most of the infrastructure, the tools from the previous two eras, these are still things, these are still responsibilities today. And frankly, many of them are still maturing those. So, now we're in this world where, breaches are occurring more frequently, data loss, virus outbreaks. I mean, stories are circulating weekly or at a minimum monthly. And we're in a moment now in this era of experience to reduce the gap or the hesitation that we've seen with the previous eras to solve the key problems for how this workforce works and plays in this connected and yet distributed world. So when I'm thinking about the focus, back to the people, the data, the threats, we're in an era of response. DLP, for example, all about response. Endpoint protection has given way to a new element of that taxonomy or that categorization, and it's endpoint detection and response. So when we start to think about security operations, incident response, it's all about response. This is the problem that we're facing now. So just a little bit about the who in the way of outside forces, inside a threat, outside a threat. And this comes from Symantec's Internet Security Threat Report, as well as the Verizon Data Breach Report. As far as who, 75% outside forces, 25% inside actors. Over half of these situations were criminal groups, showing that that kind of evolution in the threat landscape compared to when I started my career in this IT world 20 years ago. But the other thing that's going on is they're working down market, right? In the early days, the biggest logos, the biggest companies were being hit. They were more inconveniences. It was more about the notoriety, more about graffiti, spray painting a wall of a building. But now it's the motivation has changed, and we're working down market. It isn't the small companies that can hide anymore. And almost in this order, actually, these are the verticals or the types of businesses that are being attacked. It's a lot has to do with how things are being done. So when I think about how, over half of this featured legitimate hacking, a high percentage of that involves stolen credentials, right? So the need for two-factor, the push for multi-factor authentication, definitely proving that there's some weak points here. And this is all end of 2016, first part of 2017. 50% of the breaches included malware. as a tip of the spear, or the poison dart, if you will. And man, I'm really struggle with how to really perceive and kind of categorize or rationalize malware. And it's come a long way. I mean, people say it's a commodity business, but man, it's come a long way, and it's changed significantly, and then it hasn't changed at all in a lot of ways. Ransomware by far very, very disruptive, both last year as well as in this current year. And typical to the evolution of malware, ransomware families or variants actually tripled at the end of 2016 and in the beginning of 2017. Malware is coming in predominantly through email, and the motivation was financial. So it's entirely unfair, in my opinion, that it's cheaper to be a bad guy in this arms race. Although there are fewer unique authors of malware these days, the toolkits are making it so that, I'm very uneasy thinking that any one of us could go on the dark web and obtain the tools equivalent to what a nation state would have. I mean, that is really, really incredible to me. So the motivation for hacking and cybercrime has got different causes. Hacktivism is always one that's interested me. Sony a few years ago, it's a good example of that one. By the way, I still don't believe North Korea had anything to do with that. But that's a separate conversation about attribution. Coincidentally, the US government today just announced that WannaCry was North Korea, separate from the Sony, obviously. But I think Symantec had flagged WannaCry with Lazarus like way back earlier this year. So maybe they were waiting to talk to some of the leaders like Symantec and FireEye and Mandiant, et cetera, all that whole crew, in order to really get the attribution down and get consensus. But today motivation is largely financial, but I think we'll see cybercrime expand in from other areas. And I definitely expect to see more hacktivism. But what's crazy about these statistics and these figures is this is only a subset of what's going on out there and the data that's available, albeit significant. It is a subset, right? So on the response side, this is mean time to identify and mean time to contain breaches. And this came from Ponemon Institute. I'm proud to be a little bit over an hour drive from Ponemon Institute. They're up in Traverse City in Northwest Michigan. I'm in Grand Rapids at ITS headquarters right now in Grand Rapids. While most security organizations struggle, to kind of answer this question, the cost of data breach study from Ponemon is excellent. And this tells us the kind of the macro level view of the problem. So the respondents to that survey indicated that it took an average of 201 days to spot they even have a breach, right? So that's over 6 months of someone being inside, looking for the most important data to steal, looking for a strategic way to lock them out of their resources or deny them access to their own information or resources or assets. So once the issue has been found, it's taken an average of 70 days to contain and remediate the problem. And this is just simply too long. So, what's causing this? And it's likely a big part of this, in our opinion here at ITS, as well as with our partners, is that despite the investment that's been made in detection and protection, it simply isn't working. And we have to shift our focus over to better response. And right now we're responding at people speed, and we need to do better than that. So let's get into some of the tools, correlation, and the intelligence. And this is what takes kind of detection and protection to the next level. So this is a pretty ugly slide, but it indicates the saturation of different tools and startups and what is going on in the cyber landscape, whether it be network security, web security, identity and access management. I mean, these are the usual suspects in each of these areas, but there are still a lot of other companies that are not represented here. I mean, it is a bubble. It is just a crazy amount of security products that organizations have invested in. So you probably have these products, you have these logos, and these are the respective categories. But just to give you an indication of this is what this market looks like, and it is insane the amount of companies that are out there. And folks that don't have good intelligence or good correlation, what this is doing is it's representing a tidal wave of signals as opposed to legitimate alerts. So the noise versus the alerts, or the noise versus the signals, is way out of whack, and people just can't keep up. They're running between different systems, different interfaces, different tools, different screens, and while they're mired in that complexity and that mundane activity, they're losing time, and I think that's reflected in that Ponemon study very well. And this hasn't changed in several years. So that's what gives me the conviction and the confidence that, hey, we've really got a problem with response, and that's where we got to move our focus. I talk with a lot of organizations, and I ask about SecOps or ask about a SOC, and often they point to a SIM or they point to a room, and correlation is not the end state. The SIM is not an end state. That's a really important aspect of education and awareness that we have to drive as a community. And SIMs have come a long way. They used to be purely on premises, right? And even Symantec used to have an on-premise SIM. And I believe they end of life that around 2014 and decided to move that into their MSS or to their monitoring services, and for good reason. Not all organizations were committed to collecting good SIM data. So the collections from all the different devices and applications were a bit awkward. Many companies didn't possess the people, the skills to do that kind of development. Some partners did get into that integration. I know several of them out there in the community. Some did better work than others, but the reality is not everybody above 1,000 seats at the time in 2014, 2015, they had a SIM. They didn't have a SIM, and many that did weren't getting good data out of them, and kind of go back to that collection problem. So more maturity in that space, better third-party support. We need to really think of the SIM not as an end state, but more of a synthesizing funnel. Often when you ask about that, a SIM or you ask about SecOps or they point to the SOC. Yes, we have a SIM over here. We have security operations, but that's we're not satisfied with this because they're treating it like a place or a destination and a thing more than process. And that's really what it comes down to. It is not a place. It is process. So the use case that I want to talk about today is about leveraging Symantec's monitoring in conjunction with structured response. So I want to do Symantec justice with their cybersecurity services offering, which MSS is a part of, but it consists of the monitoring service, MSS, as well as a fly-to-site retainer and SLA focus incident response service, which is really, really cool. I know a lot of great people over there. Security awareness training for the workforce and for the employees of the companies, as well as these cyber range services where organizations can practice, their cyber skills, right? So it's a very well-rounded service that isn't just monitoring. It provides the IR support for organizations that need that kind of support from their vendors or from their partners, as well as right down to trying to train the users in the community. That's a longer term proposition, this notion of security awareness. Personally, I'm one of these advocates that we need to leverage the controls. We need to leverage them now because it's too crazy out there. And while we work on culture and while we work on the people, it's time to implement controls and start doing a better job out there. I'm not sure if the managed adversary threat intelligence is still a thing within the CSS stack, but that was pretty cool stuff. So a tremendous amount of value can be derived from this entire suite of products, but Symantec's monitoring is basically obtained or accomplished by feeding in the logs from predominantly your IDS, your IPS, your firewalls, your proxies, and your endpoint protection, or other like unified threat management, even EDR tools. So Symantec has a very broad range of support, one of the broadest out there, but those really represent, you know, a high percentage of what you need to be mindful of in order to, you know, determine from a threat perspective what is a weapon of inconvenience versus a potential, you know, sophisticated attack, right? So you can do more. As I said, they've got very broad support there. And what I also like about the Symantec monitoring service is they, unlike some of their competitors, they collect raw data from the sources, from the log lines themselves are not tampered, they're not modified, they're not augmented at all. We're getting them raw so that, you know, we've got a reliable, you know, we got fidelity, right? So big competitive differentiator. So all that funnels into Symantec SOC, goes into the all-seeing eye of Sauron, which is like a multi-tiered database and correlation engine that essentially is a SIM. So this is a SIM in the cloud, you know, that they put in there before a lot of the cloud-based SIM offerings that you see today. Although there's some great products and companies out there, Symantec did this early on when they realized customers were kind of struggling with their on-prem SIM product and said, look, we're going to bring it in, we're going to do it ourselves, and we're going to offer it to you as a service. So that was the right move. So that, and you've also got dedicated analysts, very smart people, you know, the cyber skills shortage out there, dedicated smart people with eyes on glass 24/7 that have got those skills, they've got that experience, they can take on you know, take all the goodness that's coming out of this correlation made by this multi-level database and this SIM in the cloud, and able to tell you as a customer whether something, again, is a weapon of mass inconvenience or a string of related indicators that really need your attention and need your attention fast. So you have an incident put into a web service or console, and it's ready for you to take action on. Okay, so that is the problem. Here's why this is important, is because they've done all this great work and now they've dropped it package on the front porch, and you have to take it and you have to do something with this, right? So here's why this is important. And as an integrator like ITS in the Symantec community, we're frequently approached about combining our services with some sort of residency to help with this process, to help onboard MSS, to help customers build the run books, you know, the incident playbooks and other aspects of organizational response. But what I never liked was the idea of doing all this manually and kind of repeating the sins of the past as far as doing this in an unstructured way. Well, we figured out a better way to do this. And not having a central platform to connect all the silos and the teams of IT, not having rich context on, you know, registered assets in this infrastructure, it makes the countermeasures and the remediation, you know, a manual process. So even a dedicated resource could be overwhelmed depending on the organization's priorities to really implement the stuff and get it operational. So we've been watching this and been seeing this, and we've always felt that there was a better way. It just took us a little while to establish the right partnership and for a vendor to come up with the right vision to kind of do this right and do it from the inside out as opposed to the inside in. Once we've synthesized with our funnel your security application logs and have connected the dots, it's a good idea to compare this with what's going on the street, right? So Symantec intelligence comes in a couple ways. Their global intelligence network, which is the largest civilian intelligence network in the world. It's essentially crowdsourcing of 400,000 customers at different levels from the products like SEP and Proxy SG, but it also combines this with context on global adversaries and attack campaigns that are exposed through their deep site intelligence service. So this can be leveraged generically as well as directed toward suspected bad actors that an organization may feel they're being targeted by as far as an individual or a group, and that's where that adversary threat intelligence or adversary defense comes in. So now that we've got an understanding of the problem with many tools and the importance of that funnel and synthesizing all that together, hash that against good threat intelligence, now the organization theoretically has everything that they need to make smart decisions about the security incidents that are most important. But there's a whole new set of problems on the backside of this once a critical incident is identified and created. So here's the next part of the problem. So let's talk about some of the real challenges that organizations are facing. Once they've invested in those tools, correlation and intelligence, first of all, I got to tell you that all of these different security products do a nice job of protecting and detecting potential security incidents, and they create a lot of alerts, right? So which ones we work on first? Theoretically, our MSS service is doing that, clearing all that up. But we still do have organizations that don't have a SIM. We have people that are doing nothing. They have a SIM. Data may or may not be good. And then we have people that are more mature that have something like Symantec's MSS. But again, the organizations still have to have a coordinated response. So then once they know they have a problem via this valuable service, the tools that they're using for resolution are very manual. For example, many organizations take the alerts from their systems, whether they're from a given product, even though they've got the correlation, they still end up going back through the different tools, different interfaces, different screens and consoles, and try to pull them into the best data repository that they have available in order to pull everything together for a particular case or an incident. Sometimes that's Excel, sometimes it's a different spreadsheet or even Word docs we've seen. And as they work on the process for resolving the issue, they may have policy on paper that they've got to go refer to, or other documents, or maybe go talk with a different person or another analyst, or maybe someone in the business or someone else in IT. And often these teams don't communicate. And so, they're using the same tools that they use for other communications like email. And this is part of the problem. This is why things are broken in the way of response. And let's talk about those teams for a second, right? So these are silos. I mean, this is something that we've seen for my entire career. We're finding that while security and IT teams are theoretically part of the same larger group, they typically act in silos, right? So they use different tool sets, and it's clunky. What they don't realize is that problem resolution and data collection, it's all woefully manual. And again, I think we have a better way. So response, let's get into what we do with all of this and realize that response is the area of this cycle where organizations do have the most control and the most influence. And just to make sure that we're understanding where the use case fits between protection and detection, there's a lot of other logos that you can put here. We're trying to represent that we're talking about a Symantec use case, mostly on the correlation side. But Symantec's got a lot of strong franchises on the protection and detection side, so we definitely want to give them that recognition here. But there's big obstacles to achieving this incident response excellence, and security and IT tool integration, coordinating all that response. I mean, it's a real problem. And without automated and integrated solutions, these teams are forced to communicate through all these dysfunctional methods and email and phone and spreadsheets. And even if we identify an imminent threat, we may not even know who to contact if we don't have the right processes and the right plans in place. So what's the problem, right? Can we pull data from multiple systems into a single system? And this is where we really get into the crux of this. This is where we get into the real message of this webinar, everyone. Can we pull data from multiple systems into one place? Can we prioritize the incident workload or handling of critical vulnerability, for example, with a clear understanding of the criticality to the enterprise, right? What is this thing that is impacted? What does it do for us? Because those are the priorities. Once we know that we have something that is critical, that's what we need to act on, as opposed to trying to do everything and make everything a priority. It just simply doesn't work. Can we easily route information to the appropriate teams and people? Are we able to enable IT and security teams to work from the same system, but do it at the same time and preserve, need to know, and preserve separation of role and duty, right? Well, we can do that. And can we automate all basic tasks and processes? Again, this is where I got to say, all right, not so fast, everybody, because automation is very, very sexy right now. It's very, very trendy, and everybody wants to automate. They see that as a huge opportunity, as do we. But most organizations, frankly, they're not ready. They're not ready for this yet. There's a lot of other things to be done in the way of process around response, and to set up, the framework and unify everything before we get into automation. That's something that we can conquer next. But in the way of response, automation, in my opinion, is still very young and very new. That's not a bad thing. I think the appetite to want to solve that and get into that is great, but we're not quite ready yet. So, the dashboard's right. A big part of this is leadership, potentially even law enforcement, auditing, CISO, for example. Does your CISO or other company leaders have the ability to see intuitive, dashboards that reflect current security posture, how we're doing on incidents, what is the overall efficacy of all that? And these are all big problems today, but we've got a great way to address this. So I'm just going to go ahead and build this out here. This is just another example of what we're talking about in this use case. And those of you out there that know us, you know that we're partnered very closely and deeply with fewer companies in order to be experts in the community and in the industry. And we're partnered with ServiceNow and Symantec, which is bringing us together with a lot of organizations to solve not only the tool maturity issue, but also solve a better internal response. So this is a high level, kind of like what you could call like a logical or a reference architecture of what we're talking about here. And there are other SIM and MSN vendors that are supported here. I was alluding to all the protection and detection tools and the vulnerability partnerships that are out there. We're trying to reach the Symantec MSS subscribers that own ServiceNow or are looking to modernize not only service management and looking at a platform and a provider like ServiceNow, but also may not know that ServiceNow has got a disruptive solution in the SecOps or IR space. And so this should be, some good perspective in seeing the maturity levels that are possible with security operations, as well as where most companies are at right now. And so this is a maturity level that we created that was inspired by our partner and our vendors at ServiceNow. And this is where most companies are, is they're down at level 0. I think ServiceNow represents a 1 to 5 scale with this. We've done a little bit differently because honestly, if we're going to be real here, manual operations, spreadsheets, hope things work, hope I can get this guy on the phone to talk about helping me resolve something. This is 0. This is manual operations. Getting into incident and vulnerability tracking, getting the basic framework to respond to these things, that would be level 1 of basic operations. Getting all your incident and tracking in one system, getting good response for core processes built into workflows with accountability defined in the way of SLAs, that's where the money is. That's where the opportunity is. And now you're off. Now you're off to the races here. And we get all the core security tools integrated into the system, ideally through some sort of correlation and intelligence service such as what Symantec provides. So we are going to have a follow-on webinar where we're going to go deeper into all these maturity levels and really demystify this, bust this down. But for the sake of this webinar today and the time, I'm just going to focus on, kind of talking about what that basic operations looks like, and that's where it is. Incident and tracking in one system, good response for core processes with workflows and accountability, and then all, core security tools, all your level 1 app security applications integrated in. So conclusions, the productive responders out there, unify the silos so all appropriate people have access to the relevant details and less time is wasted communicating and transferring data between teams. Having a single platform with an official and standard process that minimizes the rework so that every analyst or responder can follow the same incident process, and that's going to mean fewer steps missed, less going back and redoing things, huge efficiency that we've seen with customers that we've been working with toward the end of this year. And prioritizing, right, that starts with being able to leverage good asset data, a good clean CMDB to map the incidents and vulnerabilities to business services and the rest of the IT infrastructure. So this mapping, this enables the threat prioritization based on that, again, that business impact, that context, ensuring that the teams are able to focus on the most critical events first, and automating that prioritization so that we're not wasting time sifting through different tools, different systems to determine severities is huge. So next, we've got documentation along the way, right? We've been talking with organizations that are, as we go through our assessment process and we understand where their maturity is, what their appetite to optimize all of this, we're finding huge efficiencies that are possible when we talk about automating the task assignment that equips people for real action and allows them to document things along the way, as opposed to having to manually collect the evidence for investigators, Johnny Law or whoever needs to consume that. So this needs to be collected as you work. This shouldn't be a separate work stream or a separate task that we have to do. And many companies are doing this manually. They're spending 8 hours or 10 hours a week just pulling together documentation post-incident review. And so we do this correctly. We put this in a single platform. Now we're able to document and capture all this stuff along the way, which is just awesome. So built-in or factored incident response SLAs, so that the teams know what is expected of them and how leadership can gauge the efficacy of that incident process. I mentioned that a couple minutes ago. This is critical to be able to give this to the CISO, to be able to give this to other risk leaders in the organization and even internal auditors, for them to be able to just pull up a dashboard and see all this stuff and really say, are we doing a better job? We've invested in all this detection and protection technology, and now we're taking the ball the last few yards to make sure that we're covering the piece that we have the most control and influence through. So bringing this back to our use case and Symantec's MSS, again, I think it brings a ton of value with the gathering of those log lines, correlating of events, and comparing with industry leading intelligence. But every incident created by that service and those smart analysts needs a response from the organization. And rather than throw a body or a resource at building that process as a service provider, as ITS, and doing that manually in an unstructured way, we're repeating the sins of the past. And we have a better way, and doing it on an industry-leading platform that coincidentally majority of organizations are adopting. So ServiceNow is growing and is being adopted as a terrific platform to manage all of your service management needs. And while we've got the CMDB, ITS, we've always believed that there's this connection and relationship between asset and security that I don't think we've been paying attention to as a community until recently. But now I think it's out, and people are understanding there's a better way of doing things. So Symantec and ServiceNow in this case can be better together, and I think we're one of the only companies that can help address that from an integration standpoint. So, you can solve this differently with us rather than us providing staff augmentation, no outcomes, no goals, just putting a body in there. We never liked that business. We never got too far with it because we didn't like it. And now we've got a better way to address this. So I'm really happy about that. So why us? Why work with ITS? Again, fewer vendor relationships. The channel is a very diverse place. We're very focused and very specialized on fewer companies, fewer technologies in order to be deep experts with this. Mature advisory services around Symantec, helping organizations mature, adopt, transform these tools from on-prem to the cloud. We've got a 15-year history there. We have an even longer history with advisory around the ITSM space and the process and the automation business. So these two things being combined, I think, is very, very powerful for two industry leaders out there that are pervasive in a lot of companies and a lot of organizations. We have a great reputation of being ethical. It's part of the reason I joined this company. When I decided to get out of the vendor space 4 years ago and go back to where I started my career in the channel, once I moved out into consulting from the analyst side of things. High reputation of being ethical. We also have extremely high net promoter score from our customers. We survey our customers during all of our engagements weekly, I believe, and we have a great following and a great perception amongst our customers of being ethical, doing the right thing, bringing great people, and really operating in their best interests. So that's why work with us. Again, big part of why I came to the company. So I really appreciate your time today. Hopefully this was useful. If there are any other questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. Some of our social feeds are here. If you have any other questions or have any other things that you want to see or talk about, feel free to reach out to us. Maybe follow us on Twitter or Facebook. Look for our videos and our other recorded webinars out on YouTube. So thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone, and take care. We'll see you again soon.